Welcome back to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. I'm Matt Anastasi. We've got a great bunch of guests here today. When I say a bunch of guests, we've got a foursome. All brothers, the pride of Catherine and David Anastasi. We've got David, Lou, Joe, and Matt Anastasi. Welcome, fellas. How you doing today?
Great. Yeah, great.
All right. We've got, looking at the screen, we've got Matt on the far left, Joe to his left. To his left would be Lou, and to his left is David the second. I got to ask, I mean, David, you pitched me on this idea of the four of you, and I really like it for the simple reason that your parents don't even know you're doing this now, do they?
Not that I know of.
My lips have been sealed. I haven't said a word to anybody about this. So,
Lou and Matt down in Florida with them recently, so unless they whispered to them, I don't think they know.
No, nothing. No, it's in the vault.
I'm going to go one by one. Give me your athletic career at NT, basically your football career at NT as well. David, I'll start with you.
So I graduated in 85, so I would have been on the varsity team 83 and 84. So 83, my father would have been the head coach of North Tonawanda, and then 84, he stepped down, and then Gene Zinni and his team took over. JV, Al Ridge was the JV head coach, or one of them. It might have been Andy Adcock and Al Ridge, I think it was. And then when I played at Payne Junior, it was supposed to be, oh goodness, geez, I can't remember his name. Anyways, he was supposed to be the head coach at Payne Junior, and he decided he didn't want to do it. So Andy Adcock became the head coach, and then Dave Vona kind of came down and gave him a helping hand because he had never coached before. So, and then I swam, I played basketball through my high school career.
All right, Lou?
I started out quite similarly, like NTAA football, and then played for Payne Junior. Andy Adcock was the coach, and Dave Vona helped there too. Junior high was Ed Mahoney and his brother. I can't remember his brother's name. And then I graduated in 86, so I played in varsity on 85 and 84, both, for Gene Zinni. And then that was my high school career.
How about you, Joe?
Oh, all right. I was a diver. I'm sorry. I was a diver and I did track.
How about you, Joe?
I played at Wrazin with Franny Burke and my dad as the coaches. And JV was Andy Adcock, so I guess he coached all three of us. And I think Les Sheasley was the assistant coach. And then George Dermasic for my junior and senior year with my dad coaching those 2 years as well. I pole vaulted 7 through 12 and dove as well 7 through 12.
Wow. How about you, Matt?
Well, I started in freshman football. I had Doug DeLuca as the coach, and then I played JV with Andy Adcock and his brother. But I soon disappointed my father in the middle of that season. That's when I shifted gears. That was the first and only thing I think I quit. But I quit football and went out for volleyball. I played JV with Brocious was the head coach. And then I played varsity volleyball my junior and senior year with Gary Latchett. But I pole vaulted, triple jump, 7 through 12. And my father was the coach for pole vault all of those years.
I got to be honest with you. That's not a good visual, seeing your father being the pole vault coach. And how did he get involved with something like that? I mean, could you tell us that?
Well, it started with Joe, but I'll just give my little side with it. I noticed my dad, if there was a challenge, that was not a challenge to him. So, he threw shot and disc when he was in school, but he really got invested with Joe, and I was so fortunate how much he learned coaching through going to camps and clinics and stuff with Joe. But he became a phenomenal pole vault coach, and it started with Joe.
Let me ask you guys, how hard was it being the son of Dave Anastasi, the football coach, and being in the high school all these years, or being close to the high school all these years?
I don't being hard at all. I found it as being awesome.
It was an honor,
Yeah.
actually.
It was something to be very proud of.
I could remember a day where I had him in class, so he was my math teacher, and then I had track with him as well. So I would see him in the morning, I'd see him in class, then I'd see him after school, and then I would ride with him back to the house. So we spent a lot of time. But like they were saying, you know, it was awesome what he was part of, you know.
But Ed, I will tell you, growing up, you know, so we've been around North Tonawanda football our whole lives, obviously, and then, you know, being little guys, you know, my mother would bring us to practices and things like that. But you know, we never knew about college football or even the pros. Like, we knew who O.J. Simpson was, but we didn't watch it. I mean, we thought North Tonawanda football was
It
was the be all end all. So to us, you know, my father was the head coach of the Buffalo Bills in our world, and so, you know, that was kind of what we lived in, and we were exposed to so many great coaches. Like, we were blessed to know George Vetter, George Tetters, the Williams, the Chuck Ramseys, you name it, all the way through to Jancy and Rick Toms. So to us, it was just how we were raised. It was pretty awesome.
How easy or how difficult was it to be your father coaching you and you taking constructive criticism and coaching from your father?
Well, he and I had a fun relationship with track. We were both pretty stubborn and butted heads quite often, but at the same time, like Matt said, he might not have known pole vault when he started, but he worked as much as he could to figure out what it took to coach it. Football, he was a line coach, so he didn't coach me directly.
He was responsible for protecting you.
Yeah, he was responsible for protecting. But you know, on the ride home, there might have been some silence, but when you got home, you left it on the field, and there was nothing ever carried over. So it was great because he was a great coach. But like I said, when you got home, he was your dad. He wasn't your coach anymore.
So are you saying?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Just to follow up a little on that, I can remember the rides where he would like instill some like grit into me because maybe I wasn't getting to that level that he thought I was capable of. And I think he really got me to toughen up in a way that made me more competitive. But I saw a little bit more of that from him on, you know, not so much a practice, more the individual. We'd have a ride to a meet or whatever it might be. I saw a lot more of that.
What was the mood at home when the team won and then the teams didn't win?
I don't think it was any different. I do remember my dad saying, though, that, you know, he would spend all night replaying the game in his head, so he wouldn't get much sleep, and he was probably in a zone the next day where he was just tired, you know. But there was no difference in whether he won or lost at home. We didn't feel it that I know of.
But he was, you know, he immediately was going out scouting people. You know, back then you didn't have the luxury of, you know, huddle and the other things that are available today. You know, they had to do the hard work where they go out and scout the teams. And so, you know, from what I remember, you know, he would reflect on it. He would never blame anybody. If anybody he'd blame himself that they might have been able to do something differently or they missed something. But he never threw any tantrum or spoke negatively about it. It was just you move on. He hated losing. I'll tell you, I've watched a bunch of your interviews, and different people have played with him or coached with him talked about how level-headed he was. I never heard him burst out that anybody did anything wrong, blame anything, or yell about it.
He is the most competitive person you'll ever meet in your life to this day.
Yeah. Lou and I saw it just over the last couple of weeks ago when we went to visit. We played pickleball, and I wasn't expecting. He was on my team, and I didn't know he was going to dive. But he did, and he didn't make the shot. But he's right, a little regretting that. But he's that competitive. You name it. It doesn't matter if it's cards. It doesn't matter what is the game. He's determined that there's only can be one winner, and it better be him.
I think that's a testament to his parenting too, because as you were saying, what was the mood like after a game? Here's a guy that was the most competitive person I've ever been around in my life, and he didn't bring it home with him, which was great.
Is that competitive drive in your father? Is that something instilled by him, or is it inherent? Was that something that maybe came from your grandfather as well too?
Grandmother, probably.
Yeah, probably my grandmother, that part of it. But I think my grandfather, his work ethic, his calmness, I would probably say he was like my grandfather in that way.
Your grandfather had a big part in the very beginning of the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame. I mean, and the first induction in 1967. And I think, David, you were telling me that he used to cook the spaghetti dinners for the players and whatnot. What do you recall? What do you recall about your grandfather? I know he passed away around 1990, so it's been several years. But what do you recall about him?
Well, for us, we were blessed because he didn't live that far away from. We grew up. I never took a school bus to school. We walked one block to Colonel Payne and one block to Payne Junior High, where we lived on Stanley and Bryant. But our grandfather lived on Christiana, so we got to see him all the time. And then he always came over with a paint truck, and he'd be at my dad's practices, all the time. So that was great. But then the spaghetti dinners, people fought to get in the kitchen to be with him. People took off work to be cooking in the kitchen, to have a meatball sandwich with him.
To learn his recipes.
So, so it was just an awesome experience. And then, we had, a lot of cousins that were part of North Tonawanda, the Nokas. And so we were blessed to have so much family in the city and everybody supporting each other.
My grandparents went to every football game. When we were done playing, my grandma would still go and watch my dad coach.
Yeah, after my grandfather passed, my dad was still coaching. My grandmother would sit there with her little knitted parka in the stands, and she would watch him coach.
Wow, this is good stuff. Besides your father, who else were influences on you athletically?
I would say Dick Yeager was one of the best coaches in all the sports I've ever been in, both in college and high school.
I'd agree with that.
Why is that?
Agreed.
He was my math teacher too, but as a coach, he was one of the most organized, one of the most encouraging, and just a real thoughtful and fantastic coach.
Yeah, he used to, before a swim meet, he would say we should win by 2 points.
Yes,
he'd have it all figured out on his sheet. What this guy needed to do, this guy needed to do, and he was.
He's another one. All those guys. And Dave Vaughn has talked about the cast of characters and things like that, the different coaches, but Yeager was the same thing. They all hated to lose. Every one of those guys hated to lose, which I guess if you're an athlete and you like to lose, you're doing the wrong thing.
Play basketball.
We play with water basketball, and Yeager, you think he's your coach, and he'd be in the water, he'd elbow you in the face. And so, I'd agree. Yeager was influential.
What were the years like when your father wasn't the head coach at North Tonawanda?
Well, for us, so my senior year, so my whole life I knew him as the head coach of North Tonawanda, and so he stepped back, and I think, for him it was to be able to watch us play, and allow our abilities to be shown. So it was good in the sense of my senior year. He was a fan, and I think he helped on freshmen, if I remember correctly. And then when I went to college, it gave my parents an opportunity to come to college and watch, first me, and then Lou, and then Joe. Then certainly when Matt did it in college with pole vaulting. So I think it was good.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a time when he wasn't involved. He just stepped back. What it would have been your junior?
Yeah, so it would have been the '84 football season that, when Gene Zinni and all those guys came in, is when he kind of stepped back, and then he went down to freshman, and
then worked his
kind of gradually came back into it.
He kind of followed me up through.
Yeah, I was, I would have loved to have had him as my coach, but I wouldn't have got the school record for receptions if he was my coach, because he ran the ball so much. But Gene Zinni and Doug DeLuca, we called him Air DeLuca, because he just wanted to throw it. And that's I really enjoyed having them as coaches. And then I had Gene Zinni at UB also.
And Joe, you had George Dermisic, and he'd like to air it out as well too during your high school career.
Yeah, right. No, we were pretty well mixed.
Okay.
We had some unbelievable talent in the backfield. So we had great receivers too, in Corey Zayats and Eric Novosad. But in the backfield, we had Mike Snipkowski and Rich Kornacki, and both of those two were unbelievable running backs and football players. So we were real well balanced.
What would you tell people, and I'm sure in your travels, you talk about North Tonawanda football and North Tonawanda athletics, in your case, Matt, as well, too. Plus, you guys also swam. What would you tell people about North Tonawanda athletics and maybe the history and the tradition, maybe some pride with that?
Well, I can remember in 6th grade, my father had a great gig. He was he taught summer school weightlifting. And that's when I recognized when his football players were there at an 8 o'clock class for weightlifting. And I can remember it was kind of like, well, you don't have to, join this class, but I can assure you that you also don't have to start, So there was kind of like this attitude of, if you want to play, then you've got to put in the effort. And I think that is kind of what I feel my father really raised the game. When he would be the first one at the school, and I can remember he would have principals that were like, Dave, the school's not open. He would try to get the weight room open at like 5:45 in the morning so that his football players could get a workout in before school, since they couldn't do it after if they were in another sport. Well, I think his dedication to, making more competitive athletes, and some of the camps he would go to, he would bring back a lot of that as well. So that would be what I think. As far as athletics, he really stepped up how people prepared for a season, especially in the off season.
I think tradition is the biggest thing. You walk in that Hall of Fame and you see all those pictures on the wall, and you're just honored to be a part of that.
I would, for us, like Joe just said about the Hall of Fame, we've been around that our whole lives. They used to have picnics a long time ago. My parents, the 25-week club was their big night out. Like, my dad being a teacher, they didn't make enough money, and so
it was a big date.
It was a big date night for them, right? Twice a year. But so you're around those things, and you, as I mentioned, you meet George Vetter and and all the Chuck Ramseys and the Chuck Williamses and the Tedders and all these guys that were family names in North Tonawanda. And then you go to the players that we were surrounded around, the Lapers and the Montasanis and the Rossis and Fitzgeralds and Broker, all those guys that you interviewed and all the big names of people, that was all part of it. And then, you know, to see the lights in that stadium and it was just a wow factor for North Tonawanda. But then you think of the other sports that we dominated in as well. So I've always been proud of it, still proud of it, and will always be a Lumberjack, even though, you know, my kids are Star Point Spartans.
I think I don't know if people realize what it was to go to Vetter Stadium. And you know, there were people there who they didn't have kids or grandkids on the field. That was just the Friday night tradition for people, because the tradition was so strong in North Tonawanda. Like David said, you'd see the lights from our house. You would hear the band warming up,
Right.
and it just it meant a lot growing up.
And I think that marching band is often lost. You know, I mean, we had nationally ranked marching bands, you know, with Norm Alexander and I'm trying to remember the other guy, Denny might have been.
Yeah.
But you'd hear the band playing from our house. You know, our house is 1 block away, which, you know, ironically, we would get egged on the TNT games because they figure out where we live. But, you know, you could hear the band, and it was just that it would build that emotion of like you're getting ready to go to battle.
Right.
You know, so it was all part of it. It was awesome.
Vetter Stadium was really awesome, and it's too bad that they don't still play there. Obviously, they can't. But when I played in the North-South All-Star game, we played in North Tonawanda, and we went in the locker room at halftime, and the guys are like, "This is the best field I've ever played on. This is incredible here," and it was something.
Thank goodness we played there. Lou played at the All-Star game there, and so did I. And my jersey was ripped off during the game, and it was you that ran home. Lou ran home and got me his during the All-Star game, so I had a jersey to play the rest of the game.
You guys all live locally. When you drive by the old Vetter Stadium, what goes through your mind?
Passion.
Yeah, it saddens me now to look at it. Right? I mean, the school still looks decent. The fence is still there.
The goalposts are still up.
And it just like, why did they have to take it down? Right? I mean, there's no other high school that had those stands on both sides. You know, besides the big concrete main stands, then you had huge stands. Like one section of the wooden metal stands is bigger than most high schools have on both sides. And you know, and it was standing room only. You know, people would stand around the track there, and they'd make a line so you'd run. So it saddens me, but you know, I guess that's with anything, and things change. And you know, I've played on turf and played on grass like my brothers have, and I personally think the game should be played on grass. I think you want to get rid of concussions, slow down the game, and make the landing softer.
But my experience, I mean, I can remember when I was probably 7, 8, where I finally was old enough to go out on the Vetter to grab the tee after the kicker kicked. And I was so excited. Like, I can't believe he lets me do this, you know? But then I played freshman football there, and I, you know, obviously played during the day, so I didn't get the Friday night lights like they did. But it was just a cool feeling to know that I was, you know, even able to play on that field as well. So
I think David and I were talking, and just the whole experience. You come up from that locker room in the basement, you come out of the best side of the school there and through the gate, right by the ticket gate, and you walk through the crowd and work your way out onto the field. It was, you know, I played at Rich my senior year, but if you had asked me if I had to play one more game, where would it be? It would definitely be a Vetter.
What do you remember by being ball boys? I believe all 4 of you were ball boys, weren't you? And did you remember anything about Nick Seebeck?
Well, I was, yeah, the thing. So, I kind of caught the tail end of some great history, right? So I had Teddy Mohr was, when I went to high school, Teddy Mohr was the gym coach and Seebeck was still there. So I kind of caught the tail end of that. But yeah, I mean,
I remember almost costing my dad the Jamestown game because I kind of like to work my way over to the cheerleaders, and I had the tee that he needed to have on the field to win the kick, to win the game, and they were scrambling trying to find me. That some of the stuff you remember, I was pretty young, and 79 team went to the stadium, right? So I would have been 8 years old, and just the smell of McDonald's coffee on the way in the summer practices, the smell of that orange drink that McDonald's would give my dad for them to make for, water breaks during practices, during the doubles or triples they might have had during the summer, the workouts. But like Matt said, you look around and you just can't believe you're a part of it. These high school players, alluding to what David said earlier, it seemed like it was, you were part of the Buffalo Bills. They seemed like, bigger than life.
But we were part of, you talk about, the 70s. I was a ball boy in 76 with Augie Chisera, John Chisera's son. That was the JV team that went undefeated. And then 78, I think, was the first year they went to the Dunkirk Conference Center. So we got to go to that, so my dad took us down there. And so we were part of that, that awesomeness that they developed, for that winning season in 79. But then he did, they had people that would cook the food there. And then when we went to Lockport when I was in high school, my grandfather and Tom Snubkowski and some other guys came in for the week, and they had to cook the food. There was nobody that would cook the food. So those guys had to cook the food for all the players. Back then. So, those are some of the things I remember.
My dad was very good at getting as many people involved as he could to help the program. They didn't have a squat rack, so he had Rich Schweikart weld him one. Right. And they didn't have the 1 year they didn't have the money, and the kids had to raise money, and he got a hold of, I think Nancy Miranto helped out with that. He was always good at getting the right people at the right time.
Yeah, for me, we wanted to do indoor track, so we didn't have any way to pole vault. And so we did a spaghetti dinner to raise enough money to build pole vault runways, sections like they do in colleges. Like UB had one, so that's basically what we copied. But he would always be resourceful, and I ended up making a set for North Tonawanda that my nephew ended up using. So he, like Joe was saying, it didn't matter. It was just a way to solve a problem if you needed anything. So
we talked a lot about your dad so far. What part did your mother play in all these years?
Almost as big of a part.
Good answer. Very good answer, Joe.
Be on board.
Yeah, I mean, people always, when they talk about athletes, you say, oh, your dad was this, but our mother is a very good athlete. I mean, yes. She and my dad still play golf and pickleball down in Florida now. She used to play softball. So, you can't sit there and say, tennis. Because my dad, was recognized in high school and he played in college and he was a coach forever, that our athletic ability slowly came from him. Certainly he influenced it, but my mother was as much of it. But I think when you look at whether it was my mother, whether it was Karen Sheasley or any of the other wives, that, as good as the guys were as coaches, you had to have somebody solid at home that believed in it as well. And I think that is one of the most important parts. So our mother, she was very much involved and went to all the games and, never critiqued. It was always complimentary. So
yeah, because my route with volleyball, she was really helpful for me because my father was still coaching at the time football. So, I can remember her having to take me to different places and things like that because my schedule was obviously different than the football schedule. So.
And before we started playing football, she also had to watch the four of us while he was over there coaching football.
Was she a good shoulder to cry on to be consoled?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know if we cried.
Yeah,
No.
there wasn't a lot of crying on the shoulder, but
That wasn't really part of us. There was a little toughen up buttercup going on there.
Yeah, there was no argument about the toilet seat being up or down in our household.
yeah,
Her patience is the thing that I remember. She just was so just easy with everything that was going on, the incredible chaos that had to be going on, with my father's schedule or their schedules or whatever. And she seemed to be the glue that really kept us all in the right place where we needed to.
And starting to go back to school to get her teaching degree and start teaching in the middle of us going through this whole thing too.
Wow.
So she was one of the strongest people I know.
Yes, for sure.
We'd be out. My dad would either he would paint in the summers with my grandfather, or he would do summer school. And then during that period that they're talking about, she went back to school. He would take us out in the boat to go water skiing. And my mother would have her college books in there and be, reading while we're water skiing. So, she would allow us to have fun at her expense to, read and learn while she was out in the boat.
Two of you guys are members of the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame. Your dad's a member of the Football Hall of Fame. And I believe your Uncle Tom is a member as well, too. Talk about that experience of being inducted in the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame.
I thought it was one of the highlights of my life. I never thought that I should be in the Hall of Fame or anything, and I had no idea when I was nominated. But it just made me proud to be asked, and I don't know. Meant a lot to me. I was shocked as well. I had no idea. I know I had a pretty good senior year, but the last thought would be that I would be inducted into it because it meant so much to us growing up. The neat thing about my induction is I got in with my Uncle Tom the same year, and he meant a lot to us. He passed recently, but he was a huge part of our life growing up too. So it was really neat to get in when he did. He was every banquet he was there helping my grandpa make the sauce stew. He would take off work the whole day and help in the kitchen with that. So he was a huge part of North Tonawanda football as well.
We talked about a lot of different subjects right now. What would you like to talk about that I haven't brought up? You guys can go individually and decide what you want to talk about.
I'd been watching a lot of your interviews prior to us even connecting, and I watched a number, last year, but then the Dave Vona one popped up on Facebook, and I said, well, I got to listen to this one, because my dad and Dave were friends since they were, little guys. And our grandfather was friends with Dave's dad, and then Matt was best friends with Dave's son. But one of them I watched is Mark Fitzgerald one that you did. And, I remember him playing, back in the 70s, and he was a terror. I remember that. But everybody has a similar, it's the passion of the sport. But one of the things that he said that, like he's not in the Hall of Fame, and certainly there's a lot of people that are not in it, but you had asked him the question about why aren't you in the Hall of Fame? And I thought, he had a great answer. And his answer was, I think I got kind of forgotten. And that caught me when he said that. And I think he's right. And I think that, everybody that's gotten in is deserving of getting in, but there's a lot of people that have not gotten in. And I think that you got guys like my dad and Dave Vona and a couple, number of the other guys that are still around and remember some of these players. So I think that while those guys are around and remember some of the people from the 60s, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, that, maybe the Hall of Fame should look at some of those things. That the guys like Mark Fitzgerald, that I think should be in there. I remember him being a stud. That maybe before some of these guys aren't around, that you take advantage of that and say, hey, these years we don't have a representative for these years in the Hall of Fame. What do you remember of this year, or who was this player that should be in the Hall of Fame? So,
my dad could probably take you from 1950 to the present day. He remembers everything. It's unbelievable. But,
so that's just I just recently watched it, and it just caught me. And I said, he's right in what he said, that he kind of probably got lost because time has gone by, and you have the great undefeated team from the 2000s, and those guys are deserving to be in there. But there's some guys like Fitzgerald and others that, there's years that nobody's been inducted that people played football.
Yeah, I was in Florida with him and Dave Bona at dinner, and those two together would be a dynamic duo of just feeding off of each other. Bona would say when he played, he said Nick Seebeck pulled him aside and said, the reason you're not starting is because you're Italian. Better doesn't like So he had to work extra hard to get the starting position. So there's so many backstories there that you could tap into.
Well, that was also Nick's way of getting people revved up as well too. I mean, Nick was a master of playing with people's minds one way or another. He really was.
I just want to thank the Hall for continuing the tradition. It took a while for the other sports, I think, in North Tonawanda to get a Wall of Fame or a Hall of Fame. And you look at the success and the pride that most people have surrounding North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame. And it starts, I think, with the leadership. Paul has been unbelievable for so long.
He's a trooper.
He sure is. The guy just works and works and works and does what he can to make it better and better. And I just want to thank the Hall for continuing that.
Absolutely.
And I got to tell you, everybody says thank you to you, but you have done an incredible job of taking it to the next level. I mean, the films that you've downloaded in these interviews,
at the time,
you're encapsulating something that could have been lost. So I think it's awesome for what you've done, and certainly with the Hall of Fame. And Joe mentioned Paul Fry, and I don't think the Hall of Fame without him at the leadership and the support team that's been around him for a long time, it wouldn't be where it is today. So thank you.
Yeah, for me, the one thing that I keep going back to is just, like I was just telling them before this, I run into people at Wagner and say, oh, how's your dad doing? How's your mom doing? But my dad had such an influence, whether it was in the classroom, which is, he taught a lot. Well, he may have missed 5 days in 30 years. So he was in that school a lot. He was the first one in, last one out. And his influence in sports, whether it was track or football, I still see it. And it instilled in me when I was interviewed to be a teacher, where I am currently. One of the questions that was asked was, why do you want to become a teacher? And it was because of my father, that I saw how many people out to dinner, they would recognize him, and the influence that he had on them. And that was one of the things that I took from that, like, I need to be like that, so I don't know. As far as, other parts of that, I drive by Vetter, I drive by, the high school, and like, I don't know, my dad's name should be on something.
You brought up a very good point. There's no doubt about that. Thank you for the kind words. You are regarding the interview number. You guys are number 882 of videos now on the YouTube channel. We thought we would top out at about maybe 450, but this thing is morphed into something really incredible, and it's a lot of fun to be able to do it and be able to capture history and memories with guys like you. It's just a labor of love, and we'll continue this until we can't continue it one way or another. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the trip down memory lane. The growing up Anastasi, so to speak. How's that?
There we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Be well. Take care. Good health to all of you. And it's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
All right,
Take care.
thanks.
Bye.